You know, niggas gotta get their priorities together. Got their mind on the wrong things, spending their money in the wrong way.
Trapaholics, real trap shit.
Say you need that car with the rims and a charm, just like Jim. It's more than life. Yeah.
I'm telling you. Talk to him.
Say you need that LV bag
For what?
with the belt and the hat.
That's all you got though.
It's more than life. Yeah.
Talk to him. Real.
Say you wanna turn up at the club,
Why?
buy some bottles, impress them girls.
what?
It's more than life.
Oh, fucking everybody.
Yeah.
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And who dat? And I'm Ethan. And man, I'm a little late getting to this victory of the Saints over the Falcons, but we're still celebrating over here. I was talking about how I can't believe I'm still invested with the Saints after they were losing to the Buccaneers, and like I said, I'm still invested. I was still invested after the loss, and hey, I'm still invested after this win, and I'm glad I'm still invested after this win because man, I don't get much more joy than the Saints sweeping the Atlanta Falcons. And the thing that made it even better was then. Okay, the Saints sweep the Falcons. They get that win, and it was. Some people said it was an ugly win. I call it a gritty win because honestly, when it comes to wins like this, it's those heart pounding wins that are honestly better. I get more satisfaction. I get more of an adrenaline dump from gritty, ugly wins like this. Like, yeah, blowouts are nice. They're nice, but you don't get that rush. You don't get that same rush, that same satisfaction from a blowout. A comfortable like sit back and let me smoke a cigarette. Let me eat my bowl of gumbo type of wins. Like those wins, they're not as satisfying, honestly. But what I was trying to get to, what made that so much more satisfying is you got to know that Carolina they got beat down by the Steelers, and then after that you got to go on and watch the Buccaneers blow a 17-0 lead against the Cincinnati Bengals. Joe Burrow got us the win there. So yeah, the Saints are still one game back of the Buccaneers, and they don't have the tiebreaker, and the at the moment the Panthers have the tiebreaker over us. They beat us. The Panthers have already beaten us once, so technically we're in the third spot in the NFC South, and really a chance of making the playoffs are really unlikely. But it feels good to still kind of be alive and still playing meaningful games at this point in the season. So it's still fun. It's still fun to be cheering for something that this late in the season. So it's still fun to be invested. But anyways, let's kind of get into this game and talk about how it broke down and how it felt early on before things kind of spiraled and got out of hand. So let's kind of get into it a little bit. So can I get a menu and let's talk about this. So yeah, I think we've been talking about all year how these games kind of just start out as punt fest, but this game didn't start out like this. I think very few games that the Saints have had this year that they've scored on their first possession, and that's exactly what they did on this game on this first drive. They got the ball first. I guess they lost the toss, so Atlanta deferred, and the Saints got the ball first and went touchback, and they went on a 10 play drive that was 4 minutes and 54 54 seconds, and they marched down the field and capped it off with a see, it was a 19-yard pass to Juwan Johnson, and Juwan Johnson, like he is starting to show. I don't know if I would want to call him like a, I don't know. It's like hard to like say like, is he like an elite tight end, or like he doesn't have like the yardage or the catches of like an elite tight end, but like who really cares about the yardages and the catches? But when you have like the touchdowns, like that's what is more impressive than anything. Like he has 7 touchdowns, and that's second, and that leads second to all other tight ends. I think I saw that Travis Kelce has like a ridiculous amount. He's second with like 12 or something like that. But still, to have 7 touchdowns, and I think that leads like all receivers. That's like I forget where that led like all other receivers. I think that was like 12th, 10th or 12th of all other receivers. That was somewhere like with like Tyreek Hill and receivers like that. So like that's just impressive, man. Like he's a machine, and like his the touchdowns that he gets aren't like all like goal line like touchdowns, like this one he caught from like 19 yards out and like shook a couple receivers and broke a couple receivers and got into the end zone. So he's got some moves. He breaks tackles and gets into the end zone. He's not catching like the touchdowns that he gets. Like he also, he made that one touchdown in the game against the Ravens where Patrick Peterson was just looking on the sideline, basically let him just like walk in. And he had like another long touchdown against the Redskins. I know it sounds bad now because I'm kind of naming off uh, garbage times touchdowns, but these are touchdowns that were like long touchdowns, like ones that were like 30, 40 yarders. But, all the touchdowns that he gets aren't just like goal line touchdowns, not just like 1 or 2 yarders. Like he's a scoring threat. So it's impressive that Juwan Johnson is like one of their biggest threats. And yeah, he's coming up as a free agent. I guess it's a restricted free agent. Like so they better put a high tender on him, or definitely don't disrespect this man and only put like a third or fourth round tender or a first refusal tender on him and expect another team not to pick that up right away. And you think that another team's not going to offer him 10 plus million a year, because if that ends up happening, I don't know, with the Saints in their cap situation, they may not be able to match something like that. And if that's the case, you definitely hope that you at least get a second round pick or something for him in return. So yeah, so the Saints got that first touchdown, and that was just kind of surprising with how the Saints uh, have been able to score. And then it's kind of not a big surprise with how the Saints defense kind of starts out games. They usually do pretty good. Of usually not uncommon for them to force a 3-and-out, at least on their first defensive possession, and they forced the 3-and-out for the Falcons. And then what do you know? They actually got another touchdown on their second offensive possession, and this was just amazing. It was just a two play drive. First was just a 5 yard run by David Johnson, and then brought in Taysom Hill, which for any defense, really any fan, really, you thinking it's probably just going to be another Taysom Hill power or a zone read run, RPO run probably with Taysom Hill, or not Taysom Hill, but Alvin Kamara or something. But instead, it's a play action pass, deep shot to Rashid Shaheed for 68-yard touchdown, and it was just right over the safety's uh, waiting hand to knock it away for the pass deflection, and it just goes to the house for 6. And within just a blink of the eye, the Saints are up 14-0, and that's the first time the Saints have scored 2 touchdowns on their opening drive since 2020, since Drew Brees was in command of the offense, and that's just wild. I guess it's not that surprising, really, because that's really the last time this offense has been a juggernaut and has been working as a well-oiled machine. But man, that just shows you how there's been a big drop-off in this team's success offensively. But yeah, that shows you how much this team misses Drew Brees since then. So yeah, it looked like for a second that this team has really figured things out on offense. But yeah, things kind of really went downhill from then, and then it was just a punt, punt. Falcons, Saints, kind of punting it back and forth, and then the Falcons, they went on a 12-play drive, but the Saints were able to bend but don't break, and were able to hold the Falcons to a field goal. And then it's just wild to me sometimes that the Saints, they showed their old colors, their true ways on this next drive here after the Falcons field goal. They went on a 7-play drive and got all the way down to the Atlanta Falcons 15 yard line, and it was just a 3rd and 1. All they had to do was pick up 1 yard, and it's like it's a 3rd and 1, and you have David Johnson in, who hasn't really had much play all year. I think he was here earlier in the year, like on their practice squad, was maybe active 1 game, and then they brought him back again after Mark Ingram went on IR. So this was his first game active again in a little while. And like, why do you even have David Johnson in on 3rd down to pick up the 1 yard? Like, why isn't Alvin Kamara in? I guess he's got a fumbling problem too, but then this team can't even pick up 1 yard. Like that's how disorganized this team is. That's how futile this team is. They can't even pick up 1 yard without something going wrong. It's just mind blowing. Just when you think this team's figured out, has things figured out, then everything goes wrong. So it looks like for just a minute that this team might go up 3 scores, might go up 21-3, and then before you know it, they're fumbling. They can't even pick up a 1st down on 3rd and 1, and then they fumble. They fumble, and so David Johnson fumbles and gives it right back to the Falcons, but the Saints somehow still force a 3-and-out, and it's just kind of a punt fest for the rest of the half. 3-and-out, Saints go. Only have 5 plays on their next drive as well, and then the Falcons on their very last drive, which was a wild drive as well. That was a very long drive that the Falcons had on their very last drive, which was very surprising that they didn't come away with any points. I guess it's because they started it at like their own 11-yard line, but went on an 11-play drive. But the Saints were good at a bend but don't break there and ended the drive. But the Saints were really lucky to hold them to no points on that last drive of the half for the Falcons. But then the Falcons, this was good for the Falcons, and because they got the ball in the start of the second half, and they did exactly what you're supposed to do when you get the ball. In the second half, they went right down the field and scored scored a touchdown. They capped it off with a 5-yard Tyler Aguilar, Tyler Algier 5-yard touchdown, and that was kind of thing that they did. That's something they did well in this game. They weren't great throwing the ball in this game. In this game, Desmond Ritter wasn't great throwing the ball, but they ran the ball great. Tyler Algier ran all over the Saints, and the Saints that I think it really saved them that the Saints were able to respond to that touchdown, because the momentum definitely shifted on that touchdown for the Falcons to really cut into the lead to make it 14-10 for the opening touchdown of the second half for the Falcons after it was an 8-play drive for 4 minutes and 14 seconds. And then the Saints, they went on a good drive themselves that took 11 plays and set 7 minutes and 12 seconds. So they went on a very long drive as well. And then once again, it was capped off by a long touchdown by Juwan Johnson for 22 yards. And once again, he was like breaking tackles and it was just a very impressive play by Juwan Johnson. So he had 2 touchdowns. So once again, he had a 6th, and then he had a 7th touchdown in this game. So you just can't talk enough about Juwan Johnson in this game. And that was the last points of the game for the Saints in this game. And that was just lucky that ended up being enough points for them in this game, for them to have scored the 14 points so early in this game, and then to score their last 7 points pretty early in the third. Well, I guess it was towards the end of the third, and then they punted back and forth, and then the Falcons went on an 8-play drive where they were pretty much just running. That's pretty much all they did was run on the Saints, and then Cordell Patterson capped off the drive with a 3-yard rush, and then the 2-point conversion on that drive was so ridiculous. Like the Saints couldn't at this point in the drive, the Saints couldn't do anything right. So they stopped the 2-point conversion, but they got called back because Cam Jordan barely grazed the face mask of Desmond Ritter. So they got to do it again, and it looked like they got Tyler Algier in the backfield. Looked like they stuffed him in the backfield, and then he bounced it outside and got the 2-point conversion. Like that play was maddening. That series of plays was maddening on that 2-point conversion attempt. So that drew it within 3 points right there. So I was at that point in the game, I thought for sure the Saints were going to blow the game, or if they weren't going to lose, I thought for sure that the game was going to go into overtime. Because at that point, the Saints, after having finally gotten they're after they had just gotten their last 7 points from the Juwan Johnson touchdown that they'd gotten towards the end of the third quarter. Like they couldn't do anything. They could hardly move the ball. They couldn't run the ball at all. Like this was a very similar game to like the Cincinnati Bengals game and the second Bucks game. Like they couldn't run the ball. They couldn't move the ball. Like they weren't able to like run out the clock or anything. And then so then they get the ball back. This is when they're just trying to run the clock out and do all that. And then of course what they do, they go 3 and out. So of course they like run like no clock out at all or anything. And it's just like, oh God, here it comes. They're gonna march down the field, and if at least they're gonna tie the game, and this game is gonna go into probably overtime, and they're probably gonna lose in overtime. And just by the grace of I don't know that there's no Holy Spirit behind this team. We definitely know that because if that was the case, that they would probably have a winning record and be leading the NFC South. So that's definitely not the case. And somehow the Falcons they went on a 9-play drive, and the play that put them in Saints territory was a 9-yard pass down the middle. It was a no, it was a 12-yard pass down the middle from Desmond Ritter on 4th and 5, and it was caught by Drake London, and then it was actually forced a fumble by Justin Evans, and it was recovered by Bradley Roby, which was just nuts. It was like these are the kind of plays that like you can't even make this stuff up because like if that would have been caught and completed, that would have put them in easy field goal range. Like if they'd have caught that and that would have been completed, they definitely would have probably just continued they probably just ran their way to a touchdown and ran the clock out. There had been no time left. They just ran their way to the touchdown from then, won the game probably. If nothing else, like I said, nothing else. The game would have been tied and went to overtime and nothing else. They probably just ran their way to the touchdown, probably pounded it in with a Fordell touchdown. But somehow the Saints ended up getting the ball back, and somehow with 2 minutes left, they magically were able to run the ball again somehow, and Alvin Kamara was able to pick up 5 yards and take it to the 2-minute warning, and then Taysom Hill had a 7-yard run, was able to pick up the 5 yards, and then Alvin Kamara had a 13-yard run, picking up another first down. Then Alvin Kamara had another 5-yard run, and then he had a 4-yard run, and then Taysom Hill had a run for no gain, and then that took them to and that made the Falcons that was on 3rd and 1, and then that made the Falcons use their final timeout, and then of course this took them to 4th and 1, and this is like the epitome of the Saints, like pretty much like all season, how like they can't even do this, they can't even finish the game right, where like they can't even. This goes back to like earlier in the game where they couldn't even pick up a 3rd and 1. I think there was a drive even before that where it was like 2nd and inches, and they try to run Alvin Kamara, and he goes to the left and like lost like 5 yards, and then next thing you know, it's like 3rd and 9, and it was like a penalty, and I don't know, like they can't even pick up a 2nd and inches on certain plays without like losing yards. They like the simplest things that they make so difficult in this game. But yeah, They can't even sneak it with Taysom Hill without something going wrong. He fumbles the snap and leaves 9 seconds on the clock. And I thought for sure something was going to happen. I thought it was going to be uh, some kind of Minneapolis miracle type of play was going to happen, but luckily they ended up just short passing it. And Desmond Ritter, I don't know what was his thinking in his mind with the scrambling at the end, but luckily they just ended up running out the clock at the end. But that was just an exciting way to end it. The fumble recovery, the knockout by Justin Evans, and the fumble recovery by Bradley Roby. It doesn't get much more exciting than that, honestly. But when it comes to that game, it was exciting, and it doesn't get more satisfying when it comes against the Falcons, honestly. But uh, let's get into some of the stats here, because there's some interesting ones here. Because some players played pretty well. Andy Dalton, his numbers don't blow anyone away, but they're efficient. He's not turning it over or anything like that. His percentages are what's are kind of what you're looking at here. So he was 11 for 17, 151, 8.9 average, 2 touchdowns, 2 sacks for 17-yard loss, 49.8 QBR. That seems like really low, kind of. And then 132.2 quarterback rating. Like those like in comparison don't really go together, like the QBR and the quarterback rating. They don't really coincide very well. And then you have Taysom Hill, who was 2 for 2 on his completions. He had like the really nice completion to Rashid Shaheed, and then he had like a diving complete reception by Juwan Johnson. Had a diving reception from him. So he was 2 for 2 for 80 yards, 40 average, that's inflated by the Rashid Shaheed touchdown catch. 1 touchdown at 80 QBR for 158.3 quarterback rating, so a perfect quarterback rating. Then Alvin Kamara had 21 carries for 91 yards, a 4.3 average, 0 touchdowns, 13 long. It didn't really seem like, if you were watching this game, it didn't really seem like Alvin Kamara had that many carries, and didn't seem like he rushed for that almost 100 yards in this game. If you watch this game, Taysom Hill had 7 carries for 30 yards, 4.3 average, 13 long. David Johnson had 4 carries for 12 yards, 3.3 average, 5 long. Rashid Shaheed had 3 catches for 95 yards, a 31.7 average, 1 touchdown, 68 long, 4 targets. Juwan Johnson had 4 receptions, 67 yards, 16.8 average, 2 touchdowns, 22 long, 6 targets. Chris Olave had 3 receptions, 53 for 53 yards, 17.6 average, 0 touchdowns, 21 long, 4 targets. Alvin Kamara had two catches for 13 yards, a 6.5 average, 0 touchdowns, 9 long, 2 targets. Demario Davis had 8 total tackles, 6 solo. Marcus May had 7 total tackles, 6 solo, 2 pass deflections. Let's see here. Tyrann Matthews had 6 total tackles, 6 solo, 1 sack, 2 pass deflections. Let's see. Carl Granderson had 6 total tackles, 4 solo, half a sack, 1 quarterback hit. Alante Taylor had 4 total tackles, 4 solo, 3 pass deflections. I swear off those three pass deflections, he probably should have had 3 interceptions. He had 1 interception that should have been a pick six. He had another that was almost an interception if he could have got his feet down. Like, yeah, he should have had that one that was almost a pick six, should have been like a 90 yard, 95-yard interception return. Like, he needs some stickum or something, or he needs to be working the jug machine or something. Like, he's definitely the king of the almost interception. He definitely needs to be doing some finger aerobics, finger yoga with Michael Thomas to work on his hand strength or something. And Caden Ellis had 4 total tackles for 4 total tackles, 2 solo and 1 sack, 1 tackle for loss, 1 quarterback hit. Contavious Street had 3 total tackles, 2 solo, a 1.5 sack, 2 tackles for loss, 2 quarterback hits. And Bradley Roby had 1 tackle, one solo, and then obviously the fumble recovery. And Justin Evans had one total tackle, 1 solo, 1 pass deflection, 1 forced fumble. And let's see where Pete Warner had 4 total tackles and 3 solo tackles. Let's see if anything. Looking here, punting. Rashid Shaheed, I just mentioned Rashid Shaheed, or not Rashid Shaheed, but Blake Gillikin on his punts. He had 1 shank. Blake Gillikin had 1 shank, 1 punt that only went like 31 yards or something like that. I was going to talk about how I've been talking good about Rashid Shaheed on previous podcasts and things like that. But he did have 1 really good punt in this game that was inside the 20, and 1 that went for like 53 yards. But his average was good, even though he had that shank. His average was still 45.3 yards, and he had 4 punts that went for 181 yards. But he did have that 1 punt that was like a shank. I think that off of that, I want to say that was the one that led to the Falcons touchdown, actually, if I remember correctly. But that was an awful punt. But other than that, he was good. But anyways, those are the stats. Some of the stats. Really, the most surprising one to me after the game was that Alvin Kamara had that many carries and rushed for that many yards. But besides that, the other surprising thing that came out of this game was that Cesar Ruiz got hurt. that was something that came out a couple of days later. That Cesar Ruiz, he played in like every snap of the game. I don't remember any players going down in this game hurt, or any player going in the blue medical tent. But then a couple of days later, it comes out that Cesar Ruiz uh, was hurt his foot in this game. Like, foot injuries and toe injuries have plagued this team all year. And I think Cesar Ruiz had the longest stretch of starts on this team, the most consecutive starts of any player on this team. So he was the healthiest player on this team after Cam Jordan. After, I guess, Cam Jordan had the orbital bone injury a couple of weeks ago, and then so the most consecutive starts in streak was then Cesar Ruiz with 41, and he was maybe the best offensive lineman. And then, of course, didn't see nothing happen to him in this game. Never went into the blue medical tent. And then a couple of days later, what do you know? Foot injury that's been plaguing this team all year. And then he's going on season-ending IR. You know, there's not enough games left to be like, well, it's going to be a part-time IR. He's going to come back, return. So he's done for the season with a foot injury. Like, man, this team, they just cannot catch a break, you know, and he'd been playing so well, you know. Hell, there's a lot of people that had jumped off the Cesar Ruiz bandwagon, were wanting to call him a bust just last year, but now, hell, there's a lot of people jumping on the Cesar Ruiz bandwagon. It's just, man, just when you think that the team is starting to kind of get a little bit healthier, the injury report wasn't horrible last week, and all the offensive line was finally healthy this game against the Atlanta Falcons. That they had James Hurst back. They had Andres Pete back. Eric McCoy just came back from injury. And Ramczyk, he's always resting that knee. That he got that arthritic, degenerative knee or whatever he's got going on. That thing is probably a ticking time bomb, ready to explode at any time. But yeah, you thought your offensive line was 100% healthy, and then before you know it, thought your most healthy and most reliable offensive lineman, he's done for the season. Like, just never seems to end. But that's interesting, you know. I'm always the one that says, like, an injury is never good. You never want a player to get injured, yada 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 yada, you know. But what's interesting about this I is the playing time that it might open up, and this is something that was kind of ended up being kind of a bad thing, because it took him out of a position that you wanted him to play. You wanted him to be. This is what you drafted him to be, and it's what you drafted. And the player I'm talking about is Andres Pete. You originally drafted Andres Pete to be a tackle, whether it was a right tackle or a left tackle, but this kind of opens up a similar situation now. So Cesar Ruiz is out. So what do you do? What do you do with Trevor Penning now? So they've been using Trevor Penning in these jumbo packages now. He got himself a nice false start. I'm trying to think if he got two of those false starts against the Falcons. I know he got a false start on like a second and, trying to think if it was a 2nd and 5. I think it may have been a 2nd and 5, and then it turned it into a 2nd and 10, a 2nd and 10, or a 3rd and 9, or something that backed them up even more. Yeah, I think that's what it turned in. He turned a 2nd and 4 into, yeah, it went from a 2nd and inches, went to a 3rd and 9. Yeah, 2nd and inches, went to 3rd and 4, went to 3rd and 9 after his false start. That's what it was. That's the play I was talking about earlier. where they couldn't even pick up a second and inches. I think that was actually attributed to maybe a missed block by Cesar Ruiz. We're talking about how great Cesar Ruiz was. But anyways, what I'm trying to get to is, would you think about using Cesar Ruiz as that guard, as that right guard, or would you not want to play him out of position because you're afraid that may mess with his development as a tackle? That's something to kind of think about. Or would you just want to get him snaps? Would you want to just get him snaps and help get him in football shape? Or would you just want to continue just using him in those jumbo packages? So that's something interesting to think about there. So on to hot takes and game picks here. So what one of my hot takes here was I thought that Caden Ellis and Pete Warner, I thought they were going to continue to be sideline to sideline, and we're going to be all over the place with getting tackles and things like that. But they didn't really do that. They had more than enough opportunities to compile tackles and stack up the tackles, because they allowed like 100, no, not 100, but 230 plus yards rushing in this game. Let me see what I can add it up here. Yeah, they allowed just like 230, 231 yards rushing that they allowed from the Falcons. So they had more than enough opportunities to compile double-digit tackles between the two. Just Tyler Algier himself had 139 yards rushing off of 17 attempts. That's 8.2 yards an attempt. That is ridiculous. That's ridiculous, honestly. I know that's inflated a little bit because he had a 43-yard carry, but still, that's ridiculous. And a touchdown, like, come on now. That's despicable. And the fact that they each didn't have more tackles than they did is a little surprising to me, honestly, because Pete Warner only had 4 total tackles and Caden Ellis only had 4 total tackles. So I'm surprised neither one of them didn't have close to double-digit tackles. Mario Davis is the only one that was close to having double-digit tackles. He had 8. That was the most of any defensive player. So I'm surprised that neither one of them was close to having the double-digit tackles that I was speaking of. And then the other hot take I was talking about was I thought Desmond Ridder was going to have his first career turnover of his first start. And he didn't, which was very surprising. There was multiple situations where he probably should have, and those were all 3 of those were probably dropped by Alontae Taylor, dropped and stepped out of bounds by Alontae Taylor, because Alontae Taylor ended up having 3 pass deflections on his game log. The one that should have been the 95-yard pick six, and also the one where he also jumped in front of a player and dropped it, and then also the one where he caught it and stepped out of bounds right before securing the interception. So Alontae Taylor had 3 different opportunities to get an interception and get a turnover off of Desmond Ridder, but he didn't officially secure one off of Desmond Ridder. And then the one that almost maybe like halfway was maybe a turnover would have been the forced fumble. I guess that's a forced fumble off of Drake London. Like, it's a forced fumble, but it's still up in the air. Like, that's almost like a forced fumble interception. I guess that's not an interception though, even though it never hit the ground, so it doesn't count as an interception off of Desmond Ridder. So I guess I can't take half credit. I can't take half credit off of the Drake London interception, even though, if that thing would have hit the ground, it probably would have just been called a incomplete pass. So it's like, is that really a forced fumble or is it an interception? But I guess they logged it as a fumble by Drake London. So technically, I can't claim any of those hot takes of mine. And then when it comes to game picks, I trusted the Saints to win this, and they won the game. They did win the game. I picked them to win 27 27 to 20. So they didn't score quite as many points as I predicted. They scored about six less than I predicted, but I was close to predicting how many points the Falcons scored, two less. So I wasn't horribly off of the score. I was only 6, 7, 8, about 8 points off of predicting this score right. But I had faith. I had faith that the Saints could sweep the Falcons. I didn't have much trust and faith in the Falcons being able to split this series with the Saints. And the Saints are now tied in the season series with the Saints. I think it was what, 54 to 54, and that includes the playoffs, I think. And if you don't include the playoffs, then the Saints actually lead in this series. So yeah, so that's nice, and that was another reason to be pulling for the Saints to win this game. I think there's a lot of people out there that wanted the Saints to just go ahead and lose and pull off the Band-Aid so you don't have to worry or stress, or just wanted a better draft pick. Nah, I ain't with that. I want something to be cheering for. I want to be cheering and rooting for. I want the game against the Cleveland Browns to be meaningful next week, even though it's going to be chilly. And it's going to be what, like in the single digits. It's going to be a 30 mile per hour winds and 50% chance of snow. Gonna have to put on your hoods and stuff. But I want to be watching that game with some kind of actual interest, So like I'm glad they won. I'm glad the Buccaneers lost, and I'm glad the Panthers lost, because it just makes it more fun. It makes it more worthful. Makes it more meaningful. It's more. It's what you're here for. What's even the point of watching if they're completely eliminated? There's no hope for playoffs or any kind of life left in the team at all. And I think that they probably feel the exact same way, honestly. So they're still fighting and clawing for the slightest glimmer of hope of the playoffs. But like I said, that's what makes it more fun. But anyways, I think that's all I have for you. And with that, who dat? And can I get a check, please?